Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. I'm really excited to get to speak to you a little bit about sort of, the future of fashion we're getting into. And I was going to just start with a brief introduction for everybody who might not be so aware. So you're currently the Deputy Director of Vogue Italia and the Head of Vogue Talents. It's a network that sort of scouts and supports emerging designers in women's wear, menswear, accessories, I think, as well as some fashion photography from all around the world. You've been an advocate of quality, small business, a true cultural identity, I would say, which is something that at REV, those are hugely important things to us when it comes to defining sustainability. So I think there's a lot of synergy in the way that we're looking at the future. So I just want to speak to you today a bit about, where fashion has sort of come to date and where we're going to be moving in this post-COVID world, because it does seem like there is an incredible tidal wave of change coming our way. So you're obviously from quite a fashion legacy. Your aunt was Franca Susani. Your mom owns 10 Corso Como, which is amazing. Such a great place to go and be inspired. So can you kind of walk us through how you found your own voice within fashion and how you've evolved to sort of be the woman you are today in the industry, really?
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, and hello, everyone. It's as you were saying before. I mean, I come from a fashion family legacy, and I have to say that maybe it's funny to hear, but when I finished school, which I was 18. I mean, I knew what my parents were doing, but not really. I mean, when you were a kid, they asked you, what do you do? My mother works, I don't know, in a magazine. My father is, never know what to describe your father work because it was too complicated, you know. And you say, yeah, he works in a company, he does numbers, you know. And so the thing is that when I stopped school, I had to go to London, but in the end, I decided not to. So I stayed in Milan. I decided to start literature and foreign languages, but I have to say that I wasn't a big fan of studying. So I spoke with my parents and I said, listen, I start university, not sure if I'm going to end it because, I want to also start working. So the obvious thing that came along was, to begin to work with my parents that had opened Corso Como since 3 years, because we're talking about 1994, and Corso Como opened in 1991. But after just a few months, I realized that working with parents is not always easy, and probably I wanted to do another experience before trying again with them. And it came kind of natural. I mean, I think people can smile, but I really said to my mother, Aunt Franca works in a magazine, maybe she needs someone to do an internship, or maybe she can help out. So this is how really began my career. I mean, the door was open because, Franca was the editor-in-chief, and she said, well, let's give it a try. Obviously, at that time, it was a little bit easier to get internships, and it was also different times. So it kind of started there, and I have to say that my internship almost lasted 7 years. Because obviously, I mean, the experience, because anyways, it was a different time. It wasn't, internet was coming over. You didn't have computers. You sent information by fax. I mean, I'm not so old, but I mean, it was 95, 96. And so then I had really the opportunity for the first really 5 years to work in all the departments of the magazine. And then it came out that when I started, there was the 30 years anniversary of the magazine. So I was like locked in an archive, and that's where I kind of absorbed all the fashion and the photography and the beauty of it. And I obviously remained kind of in love with it. And so then I began to work in the fashion department. I worked at that time with my deputy editor. Most of the shootings were done foreign. So I kind of did like a Pony Express for 3 years, going on shoots on with bags and just traveling around the world. But my luck was that the shoots I was going on was Steven Meisel, Bruce Weber, Peter Lindbergh, Paolo Roversi, Helmut Newton. So that was really like, I was a very lucky girl. Then I followed the steps going forward, being assistant of the two editors of the magazine that at that time was Anna Dello Russo, which I think everyone knows. She's the deputy fashion editor of Vogue Japan, and she was editor at Vogue, and then she's been also editor of Uomo Vogue, and Alice Gentilucci, which was the other fashion editor. So I assisted them more or less in total like 4 years. And then myself, I decided I was stylist. But throughout these years, I kind of grew up inside me the fact of loving to do research and scouting, because when you prepare shootings, apart from the designers you need to shoot because maybe they're advertisers, I mean, you do all a part of research because you want to add something more to your style or that. So that's when it came out more the fact of, searching for new things. And that was probably beginning of 2000, even when I was stylist myself. And then we had this supplement of trends of the magazine that came out twice a year. And I used to go in showrooms, shoot one with my digital camera. Nobody was shooting. Everyone was asking me for these pictures you're doing. Sometimes they didn't let me. And it's funny because now they ask you to shoot everything, it's like shoot, shoot, shoot. So it changes. Then to make it brief, because if not, we stay here just explaining what my path was. At the time in 2004, Franca with Alta Roma, which is the organization of the fashion chamber in Rome, decided to open a contest to support Made in Italy because there wasn't a change of generation. And this was in 2004. In the meantime, I continued to scout and everything. And Franca, who had always a vision and think forward, said, well, listen, you continue to pull out all these designers, which are interesting. Why don't we do something more dedicated? And this was 2008. And I said, well, I would love to. And I said, let's call it Vogue Talents. And this is how it began. And I always say to people, the really reason why we decided this project and which I decided to spend, my career and my life into it was the fact that someone opened the door to me and gave me the opportunity. And I thought, who's going to give the opportunity to all those new generation of talents? Who's going to open their door and give them the chance? So for me, this is still going on now. I mean, the fact of having a platform which is international, it doesn't have boundaries. It never had. Born obviously with Italian Vogue, so in Italy, but as we always thought, I mean, DNA of Vogue has always been inclusive, without boundaries, and think forward. So, and this is what we're doing right now. So obviously 10 years have passed, many changes, huge changes. And obviously the responsible part has come fundamental right now, because I have to say that probably I always been kind of very, in a way, sensible to the argument, but until 2012, I wasn't really looking into it. And we did a big event for 3 years in the Middle East from 2013 to 2015. And the first year, Franca, which, as I said, was always think forward and always provocative, we were in Dubai, the most fake city ever, everything new, constructed, nothing responsible. And we were doing an event, a big event, fashion shows, exhibition, talks, and everything. And she said, let's do a section dedicated to responsible projects. And I looked at her and said, okay, let's do it, because I'm always someone that says yes. I mean, nothing is, but that we're going in a place which they won't care even zero about responsibility. And she said, yeah, I know, but let's do it. And so there it's where I did a huge research of obviously designers, startups. And when I look at that file, which is now 7 years old, almost 8, there's still projects which are still ongoing now. So I think there were many designers and people thinking forward. And then for 10 years, we also have been supported by YOUX and supporting the new generation of designers selling on their platform. And the last 2-3 years, speaking with Federico Marchetti, the CEO, I pushed, because he was already sensible, because he opened Uxygen. He was one of the first, to concentrate e-commerce on sustainable projects. And I said, well, let's change it a little bit and let's just support responsible projects. And this was done for the 2 years. And instead, this year, we decided to bring it forward, and we've launched a contest called Vogue Ux Challenge, which is open to startups and designers which are investing in responsible projects. And it's going to be a money prize, but apart from the money, it's going to be a mentoring prize, a support from the magazine. because the reason is that it's always the fact of supporting the new generation. But now, for me, the new generation has to be responsible. They do not have any excuse not to be. So this is a little bit an overall.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I feel like you use the word responsible. You know, people use sustainable, people use ethical. I mean, there's so many words we could throw around here. But
I don't. Unfortunately, sustainable is a word that fashion has kind of violated and doesn't really make sense right now.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was on a panel with the CEO of Ghani, and he said that too. He was like, you know, we're not a sustainable company. Like, you know, throw me out like the names of any major really sustainable companies. Like, you know, there is no such thing. And
No,
we're trying to battle that. And I think it's much easier probably because we only work with small independent designers. So it's easier for us at
no,
REV.
it's about being responsible, aware, and conscious.
Hmm.
That's, I think, the three most important words.
Yeah, so I guess for you then, like just diving into that a little bit more. So like personally, and then also within the context of the industry, you know, what does this mean to you? Like, what are the sort of criteria that you're pushing for when you're thinking about promoting responsible fashion or thinking about what the future of that means?
Well, for me, responsibility is a little bit looking at it 360 degrees, meaning that responsibility is also social responsibility, community responsibility. There are many projects that are starting in countries such as India, Africa, where obviously tradition and artisans are very strong, and so they start doing projects, including the community and helping the community that needs help, of women that maybe are in difficulties, or about women, of integrating women in the system, because as we know, in some countries women are still not considered part of, about the society. So I think also the community and social part is a responsible project. And responsible means inside there's sustainability, but there is also awareness, consciousness, and also the fact of helping a community. So for me, that's also responsible. And then obviously, as we all know, no, there's not going to be a whole company that can be sustainable 100%, because there's always going to be that 5 or 10%, which is the car you need to use to go there, or get a plane or something. So I think the best you can do is to be as more responsible as you can. And obviously all those community and social projects are very linked to, to handmade, to slow fashion, to be linked to traditions, to be just, kilometer zero, because you're doing everything in your own village. So I think that's very important. Instead, going to designers of the new generation, which are completely conscious and aware of the problem, and they want to make a change. I have to say that now that I scout, if I scout 10 names, at least half are responsible. Sometimes even more than half. So this is already a big move, because the other 3 or 4 that maybe are not responsible, they're considering to become, maybe they don't have the tools, they don't know how to move. So this is where we come in as media, or you as, a platform company that needs to aware people of how they can become responsible.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that leads so well into my next question, because I feel like, and particularly now, there's a sensitivity, I think, within the media about how we talk about fashion. Like, what is the place of fashion right now in a world where, let's just use today as an example, people are dying, people are losing their livelihoods. We all over the globe are being sort of ravaged by this pandemic. And, what do you think the role of fashion and of media is at this time? Is it there to be supportive? Is it there to be inspiring and creative? Or is it there to be more sensitive?
It's everything. It's everything. They have to be supportive to all those projects, and as in this case, to the new generation, they need to be sensitive, they need to aware, they need to communicate. So I mean, media as ours need to, not just talk about responsible projects, because obviously it wouldn't even be the truth, so you have to also be balanced in what you say. And the companies, I always think about that, the companies obviously they cannot be responsible from one day to another, that there's going to be a timeline which they're going to be controversial. I mean, I always get the example, and here I just stay on the surface because obviously going to depth means, you know, knowing things much more. But take an example, H&M. H&M, it's controversial because obviously it's a big company. They have huge social problems regarding work-wise and salaries and everything. But at the same time, they want to change, and they're doing a lot of communication regarding, they launched a challenge to support startups. They have a consciousness collection, but they're not responsible 100%, but at least they start to communicate that their intention is to do that. There's always going to be a time where the gap is controversial, and obviously they have to secure and how do you say, and in a way realize, solve the problem about social and salary, because that's the huge problem of everyone. It's not just H&M. You know, H&M is a huge company, so when you're huge and you're known, everyone comes to you, no, in positive or in negative. But I think that that's important, because it was a few months ago, someone told me, you know, they did like a study between 18 and 30, asking which were the most sustainable brands. And now I don't remember all, but it came out Patagonia,
yes,
H&M, and Zara. Because obviously the strength of communication of H&M is much more stronger than someone else. So it is controversial, but at least if this can help that people go in a shop in H&M and realize that they're not buying the right stuff, but they can give you the alternative of buying right, it's a way to aware consumers, obviously, you know. So, I mean, I just take an example of H&M because it's, you know, it's the big brand that everyone talks about in negative and positive. But big brands, I think that they need to begin to communicate, because they're all, the fear is, oh, I don't communicate because then there's always going to be someone that comes and criticizes you anyways, because social media, unfortunately, the beauty is that you can communicate to everything. The negative part is that everyone thinks that they can have the right to criticize everybody. So that's, you know, so, but I think that brands, big brands, need really to begin to communicate much more of what they're doing, even though it's not done completely, but at least people know that if they go and buy, I mean, I don't want to name brands, but if they go and buy brand A, they know that they're working on something. They won't go and buy brand B because brand B is not communicating. So in a way, it's a way to aware people, because if not, the common people on the street, common meaning that they're not in the industry, how can they know what they're buying, what they're choosing, and where to buy if the companies do not tell them what they're buying? I mean, you go in a shop, you see a white shirt, you see a tag that explains you're buying this t-shirt, it costs 28 euros. This is the reason why it costs, because you think maybe it's too expensive, but you know that it's gonna stay in your wardrobe for a long time. And once you're gonna give it to someone or not, it's you know, it's gonna stay.
Yeah. But do you think, because it's interesting, I actually had the journalist Dana Thomas on a couple of episodes ago, and her argument with this was actually it's more the media's responsibility to educate people, because they need to be the ones that are objective, because obviously a company like H&M is always going to, you know, her point was, if H&M spent the amount of money they spend on marketing their conscious collection on actually making the company more sustainable, we'd be getting a lot further. She was like, you know, the budgets on the communications of the conscious collections are millions, and that's money actually that H&M should be investing in paying their workers. So, you know, so is it more the responsibility as somebody who works in media and who works in luxury, you know, where do you think the responsibility lies? Because surely there is a little bit of like, you know, as a customer, I think it can seem confusing when you're going to a company that has a vested interest in you shopping from them to educate you.
I mean, right now, for what we are living, we are all like in a blank page that needs to be filled in. So I think that really the responsibility is on everyone. It's not because I don't want to say who is more responsible to others, but I think the responsibility is on everyone, because we as consumers, need to go into a shop and demand what you're buying. And on the other side, if they begin to see that people go in the shop and they're not buying anymore because they're demanding what they're buying, they're going to change attitude, and vice versa. Because I mean, I always say, and I said, I was in New York with this company, big company. They were showing to me the whole new collection, which part of it was sustainable. And I said, but why don't you, I mean, you don't communicate. And he said, what do you mean? Yes, we communicate. No, you don't communicate. You think you communicate, but you're not communicating, because people, I mean, I can know it because I'm here, you invited me and everything. But what about the people on the street? You have thousands of shops. Why don't you start doing some shops, responsible shops, which you go in, the usual t-shirt that everyone buys, and it's a big brand that everyone has, instead of, you know, paying it maybe $30, $20, they're going to pay it 35, but you're explaining them why and the reason why. I mean, you have to take the risk, because it's not, you cannot always think about quantity and not quality. I mean, I know it's very difficult, and now it's going to become much more difficult because people need to get in with, you know, there's going to be a huge economic crisis. People are not going to need to sell. I don't even want to think about the black market of stock that will come on after this big problem, you know, because, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, it's going to happen because there are going to be a lot that have so much stock, and what they're going to do with all this stock, you know. So it's challenging, but I think that it's a responsibility that everyone needs to take.
Yeah, it is one of those kind of interesting times. And I think you talk a lot about quality, and I think that is interesting in a price point, because, you know, it's something that, speaking of criticism, like at REV, that's something we get all the time, is that, you know, our curation of sustainable lifestyle products are more expensive than the things that you would get like normally. And, you know, how do you sort of see that going forward? Do you think it's something I'm really interested in? And obviously nobody has a crystal ball, but do you see consumers on the other side of this being like, you know what, we're going to buy less, we're going to invest in fewer things, we're going to try and shop more sustainably? Or do you think with sort of like, you know, this need to reboot the economy so quickly, we're just going to be churning out more cheap stuff, more sales, you know, like, because I really feel like it could go either way, you know?
Well, the thing is that right now we're speaking with companies, and they're saying that they're obviously in this lockdown. They since they had time, they, like, you know, sent inquiries to their usual customers to think about what they are gonna buy when everything opens up. And unfortunately, the results are not so positive, because people are gonna expect to go back to the shops and have items discounted or at good prices. So I think that there, obviously, there has to be a major effort towards the company not to kind of, you know, sell these items like as if like really at zero, because then consumers will not be educated. And I think at the same time, consumers should be reasonable. I mean, not everyone has the tools to understand, but to go there and say, okay, I think that since after 2 months of lockdown, you want to have the pleasure to go into a shop and buy something. I mean, I have this pleasure about going to a shop and buying something, but obviously we're all in different boats, you know, economically wise. So not everyone has the same amount of budget. So I think that the best would be, I mean, because they were, sorry if I skip another, they were talking about the revenge shopping in China, you know, about it's all started from Hermes. And last week it says that I think LVMH had like a plus, I don't know how much percentage of sales, and that they were thinking of, you know, hiring the prices. So I mean, obviously we cannot be so naive about thinking that everything is going to go well and we're going to be all responsible. But I think in a way they have to, you know, take the chance, because as I said, people are going to come out, they're going to will to buy less, because they're not want to spend, because maybe they don't have the money or they're going to expect maybe that there are discounts. So I think it's a matter of rebuilding a little bit also the rules of marketing. And I think that what's really missing in fashion are laws, strict laws, because they're not really laws in fashion. I mean, you can do whatever you want. I mean, when the big news about Burberry 2 years ago that came out, that they were, burning their clothes and that they were not doing it anymore. They didn't got fined for that. I mean, there are not fines or laws in fashion. So I think there should be strict laws on certain things. I mean, about maybe not to produce, not saying you have to produce totally responsible, but maybe you have to stay into parameters, saying you cannot consume more than tot water per year. I mean, I think there needs to be also laws on the other side, because the companies themselves are not going to do it all by themselves unless there's also restrictions on it. So I think it's challenging, but it must be done. And I think this pandemic, unfortunately, it's been a disaster because many people have died, and the economic crisis is going to be huge, and we're going to keep it at least for 3 years probably. But I think it's a good starting point to restart, with the right pace, and think about the system in a different way.
Yeah, and I think, I wanted to actually briefly ask you about that Vogue cover that came out a couple of months ago, Vogue Italia, where it was all prints and illustrations. And I found that, and obviously that was pre-pandemic, but it was interesting because it was the first kind of, we've had some incredible magazine covers, in the last year, with Edward Enninful coming out, and, and diversity and embracing change. But what I loved about that issue was that there was a direct correlation with creativity and doing things differently, and also sort of the savings on the environment of not, flying couture pieces all over the world for photo shoots, et cetera, et cetera. And I just wanted you to kind of talk about, I guess, if there was any takeaways from that, or if that was something of a benchmark that you could see as a way of rethinking the kind of way of fashion shoots, fashion magazines, how we're going to be thinking about producing things going forward within media.
Well, I think that, the cover in January was also a message that also Condé Nast wanted to give about the commitment to be more responsible. And obviously Italian Vogue, that has been always very thinking forward with their covers and the stories. It always happened. Since the beginning with Franca, and now Emanuele is keeping the same, to give, a vision, and to take also the courage to give messages. And, the January issue was to make understand that everything is possible, the thing of doing a magazine that instead of shootings, you do illustrations. I think that what's the message was that everything is really possible and feasible. And if you want really to happen, it makes happen. But you have to also consider that, especially now, I'm also very underlining this, because now everyone is going into virtual, 3D, 4D, because there's the problem that we are stuck and we cannot have events, which is beautiful. But you cannot stop of dreaming, of having emotion, of the touch and everything. And at the same time, it's the same thing for magazine. You cannot think that there are magazines such as Vogue Editions or Italian Vogue where there's not the image beauty about the shooting. It doesn't make sense, So I think the important message was, this can be done, things can work out, but obviously the beauty of seeing beautiful pictures of beautiful photographers, talented. It's also, you have to think that it's a system of many people that needs to work, and it's, so I think it's just a system that probably nowadays shootings from now on will be made more responsible, which before nobody thought about it. Probably people will think, the food has to be the right one. Maybe we don't need 10 cars, we try to go out with 4. I think that this will make think about, because maybe sometimes shooting was a little bit over too much. And so people will think about a little bit more. Me, myself, I was already aware and sensible, but I'm more sensible now. So I guess who wasn't sensible at all has become a little bit sensible. So the reason why of January issue was about, giving the message that things are possible, and that you can always give it, obviously, a fashion point of view. And obviously this is Vogue Italia DNA that has always been distinguished for that.
Well, and I think, that leads me on very well to my next question, which is, when I mentioned to a couple of my friends who are in the luxury space that I was speaking to you today, overwhelmingly, everyone wanted to know your thoughts on the future of fashion shoots and fashion shows. You know, I think the fashion show is, there is this huge question mark. And like you say, on one hand, I don't think they've been done very responsibly in the past. I mean, flying thousands of people all over the world for, you know, a 20-minute fashion show is that, you know, whilst on one hand we can all celebrate, you know, I'm thinking of one incredible one in, you know, lavender fields in the south of France. Like, on one hand, the images from that, it's beautiful, it's inspiring, it's something incredible to feast the eyes on. But also now it's like, when you think of the carbon footprint of what those things were, and also, you know, again, like the sensitivity to the place the world is in now. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think we're going to go back to that?
Well, listen, the thing is that, I mean, we don't have the crystal ball, but something is very clear. I mean, the show that Jacquemus did in the lavender fields in south of France is something that everyone is going to remember. And this is something about the fashion shows. This is how a fashion show needs to be. And in that show that probably there were, I don't know, there weren't huge amount of people. I wasn't there, someone else from our team went. I think probably, I don't know, probably 200 people, which was, you know, because I mean, Jacquemus is a designer that's growing, he's becoming big and everything. But this, it was his word, his vision, his work, he wanted to share, you know, something. And this is all about going back to that. So I think that there's gonna be a big clearance in the fashion industry, because there were way too many people, which I'm sorry to say, but why are you in the fashion industry? I mean, there was too much. I mean, the fashion has always been accused that they were not inclusive. Then we became probably too open to everyone. I mean, which doesn't mean to go back to be not inclusive. But I think that, you know, you have to keep the quality. It's not about quantity, and this is for everything. So I do think that fashion shows will still, and we need to go on, because the beauty of sitting, waiting, but it has to be of really high quality. And probably in the next year, we're gonna go back a little bit when it was about war times. After the war times, the people opened just a house and maybe there were just 50 people. I mean, you have to also think about that things, special things need to be also in a way, you have to work to have them, you know. It's not that you can go you cannot obtain something easily. So I mean, if I will not get invited to some shows, I will not get offended or something. I mean, you have to see it always in a different perspective. I mean, I think, okay, I'm not going to go there, but I know that the show is for 50 people. Those 50 people can help the brand, but at the same time, they're not consuming. I mean, you have to also think about the rest of the planet. You cannot always think about yourself and, oh my God, they haven't invited me to the show. Who cares? I mean, it's not anymore about that. So I think that fashion show obviously, maybe it's too much, but they're going to go on. We're gonna probably need to think about from 2021. I mean, 2020, I don't think it's gonna be possible, or if there is, it's gonna be something really, as I said, in-house, 20 people, something like a dinner or intimate dinner of a special, as you know, couture began. So because the beauty, the emotion, the music, the girls, you know, those things, it's like going to the theater, you know, it's like seeing a movie at the theater rather than home. I mean, you cannot lose those aspects. And welcome to technology, welcome to 3D, 4D, because it's also a way of, you know, not having carbon footprint and everything. But we cannot go virtual. I mean, you're telling to Italian person, I mean, we need to touch, we need to smell, we need to see people. I mean, so I think it's a balance. And the question, what's going to happen in September? It's it's in a way it's a positive challenge, because I mean, I'm full of energy, because you can do so many new things and also learn about new things. So who cares if we are not going to have a classic fashion week? I mean, wow, maybe it's more exciting. So I think it's obviously with June, July with men's, and September, I think it's going to be a big a big adventure, a big challenge, positive challenge, also a way to understand how to go forward. You know, there are big brands that have started already to think about their own. I mean, to make a system, it's not easy, but the fashion, when there is difficulty, it becomes a system. Then obviously, you know, the big brands, they have to have their own pace. I mean, we cannot think about to be a whole community altogether. But, you know, like the new generation are already creating new communities, because we know that, you know, joint forces makes it more easy and more, you know, more stronger. So yeah, going back to the fashion shows, I cannot say that there will not be fashion shows, because I'm sure something will be done, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Obviously respecting, you know, the laws and what we are gonna be in September.
Yeah. And I think that that actually kind of goes into a question I've got just for you a little bit more personally. You know, I think it's something we're all thinking about. I had Arizona Muse on last week, and we were speaking about it, you know, personal travel for fashion and how this is going to look going forward. And I hope you don't mind, but I was obviously stalking you a little bit before I spoke to you today. And I was reading a New York Times article where you said, I think it was a couple of years ago, you know, you spent about 2/3 of your time traveling, you would say. And I, you know, on one hand, that just seems so idyllic and so amazing. And I can only imagine the experiences of what you've been able to see and the creativity you've been able to produce out of all of that incredible travel. But going forward, it's sort of like, I mean, at least here in London, I don't know how it is in Italy, but, you know, I live in central London in Hackney, and I mean, there's like clean air. Like it's almost like I'm at home in Maine. It's
No, it's
amazing.
incredible.
And it
You know,
makes, you know, like
sorry.
personally, sorry, it just makes me think personally, you know, what am I doing on the other side of this to make sure that this air stays, that we, you know, this carbon stays out of the atmosphere? And I'm kind of
Wow.
asking everybody, you know, like, what do we do about travel for work? Because on one hand, it's fabulous, and on the other hand, is it worth it?
Also that, I mean, as I said, I was lucky that I traveled so much in these years that I have, like, metaphorically, like my hard disk is all full of things that I can go on for the next probably 5 years. So, but traveling, obviously, for me, it's essential, because it's not just about, you know, going to a fashion week, which I have to say it's the last thing I'm interested in, but it's to go and meet people, see the country, understand what's going on, you know, understand the community wise. So for me, I really, really miss much traveling, but I also realized that probably, I don't know if I'm gonna take another plane in 2020. I'm not sure about that. And I have to say that if it's gonna happen, it's not gonna be a big deal, but it's going to be more a big deal for the people that will not see us and have our support maybe in that time, even though as I said, the virtual thing helps us a lot. But for me, traveling is really about absorbing, you know, the country where I am, the people and everything. So even that, probably if I traveled, you know, I don't know, took 80 planes a year, which was probably the average, I will decide maybe to cut down at 30 or 20, you know, and say, you know, maybe I go there, is it necessary? Or maybe I decide to go there just once a year. You know, and then sometimes meetings. I mean, I was talking to this other person, a CEO of a big company, and said, you know, every week I used to get the train to go from Florence to Milan, back and forth to do meetings. Now we can do meetings by video. Obviously, it's not going to have to be like that, but I think this is going to be a big cut. Obviously the air is not going to remain like this, but I think the planet is going to breathe much better. And even though people are going to begin to travel again, they're going to travel again with consciousness, because unfortunately I think that for the first year there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to travel because they're going to be afraid.
Yeah.
Then there's going to be a percentage of people that are not going to travel because their company will not let them travel, will not have the budget to make them travel. Then there's gonna be probably the percentage of people that travel for pleasure and vacation, which gonna travel less because maybe they decided to be more conscious, or unfortunately they will not have the money. So I think that, I mean, the air, the planet Earth is gonna have the chance to breathe until probably the end of this year. And then it's going to be us that we need to be, you know, more conscious, because consider that now, I mean, to travel, it's going to be so expensive because planes can travel just with a third of the passengers. So can you imagine the cost of an air ticket to travel on a plane of 180 people and you're just 50 of you? I mean, you have to travel because maybe urgent matters of family, or really because you're changing the world, or you're a doctor or something. I mean, it's not because, I mean, because if you're a CEO of a company and there's a problem, I think that most of them can be dealt, you know, through a phone call right now. That obviously the economy needs to start again, so we need to go back to travel. It's going to be the air companies that need to think about also to do planes which can, you know, in a way pollute less. But we perfectly know that pollution is not going to be from 100 to 0, but we can make it from 100 to 50 maybe. I mean, look at all the videos of the animals in the cities. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, I like made me cry, you know, because I mean, how nature repossess about, there were pictures in Milan that there are the, I don't know how you call them. There's the, you call it tram here. It's the bus on the rails.
Yeah,
On the,
tram, just
yeah. So the rails, they were not passing, and so flowers began to come out from between the two rails, you know, something like that. There's a whole park here that we never saw flowers. It's full of flowers now. So even that beauty, and I think that the people will love that this thing stays. So if you use your head enough, it means that it's obviously majorly it's the car pollution and plane pollution. So like me, I had my scooter, which is 15 years old and it's dead. And now I'm thinking I will buy an electric scooter because it's my main way of moving around. I don't use the car. I have an old car, but I just use it when I need to, you know, go out from the city. And so, I mean, if if each of us does, you know, small changes every day in their life, I mean, we cannot think that we are radical changes because we're human beings. We know how we are. I mean, we are up to help, but, you know, radical, total change. I mean, there are people that do it, but I think that already if each of us does changes every day, it's already a big change.
I love the idea of the electric scooters. I'm hoping that.
Yeah. I went on Saturday to try it and I loved it.
Oh my God. Okay, well, good. That's one mega takeaway from this, guys. And then kind of my last big point and big question is, you know, you've been a proponent, I feel, for quite a while of this concept of made in Italy, but, you know, actually made in Italy, supporting local production, supporting quality, supporting heritage. And, you know, I think what we've seen in this pandemic is the fact that supply chains are so scattered all over the world and so decentralized has been actually hugely problematic. I mean, we're seeing people in Southeast Asia who've had, you know, orders pulled from them, and now, you know, their already awful living wage is non-existent. We're seeing, you know, people not able to fill orders, things backtracked, and, you know, and I guess I'm interested in seeing if you can see some of the positive in this, because do you think that this is going to force people into being like, you know what, if I produce closer to home, I have more control? Or do you think there's going to be an effect on this? Because I think local production is something that we think is incredibly important at REV,
but it's already happening, because there was an article or I saw it on TV about how, I mean, in Italy, especially in small villages, there's still this thing of local shops, that there's not the big grocery supermarket where you to go and buy. And they said that more than ever now, because the fact that you don't want to go in a crowded place or anything, they have worked much more now rather than usually. So the fact of local buying and local support is gonna for sure come back more and more. I mean, because people, I mean, in Italy it's a lot. You like, we live in Porta Romana, which is an area, classic Milanese area, where there are, because Milan is made on circles, and then the inner circles has these huge old Roman walls, and it's the ones that, you know, make you understand how Milan works. And they're all like, there's the fruit shop, the bread shop, the shop where you go and buy fish, And this shop says that now they have been working more than ever, because obviously the fact of going down and going buying instead going to a supermarket. Before it was vice versa. Oh, I don't go there because so I go to the supermarket and buy everything, I find everything there. Now the fact of even, the fact of being locked down and say, okay, I go in 5 different shops, so I stay half hour more outside. So yeah, and I think also regarding, obviously for us, made in Italy is a fundamental, and there was a huge problem because the government wasn't making the factories working, and all like the English designers and the French brands produce in Italy. So obviously the local workers are struggling a lot, but I think that this will make people make them support more, and they're going to work a little bit more if they manage to stay open. That's the problem, because unfortunately Italy right now, the economic damage is huge, and unfortunately the government is not being fast enough and is not giving the amount of right money. So the problem is that we are risking to lose a huge local community of artisan and traditions, and so we hope that we manage in a way not to happen. But yes, the question is, I think it's a slow way of slow production, slow shopping, slow eating, local. It's going to be much more.
Yeah. So then that kind of takes me into my last question, Zara, which is this idea of, another thing we talk a lot at REV about is this, what does the idea of luxury mean in the new sense? And we've sort of redefined it ourselves over the past, couple of years, but I think more than ever, luxury is probably not going to mean, I guess it might, but a 20,000 pound handbag, I don't see that being the thing that people come out of this really wanting to buy. And
No.
I love that you just brought up, it's not just about fashion, it's about food, it's about ceramics, it's about, anything. So for you, looking forward as an editor, as someone who, is going to be heralding young talent and pushing forward a new agenda of creativity, what do you see as the new luxury? Like, how would you define that?
Well,
That's a big question.
the word luxury is like sustainable. It doesn't have anymore the beginning of its, sense of the word. And for me now, the real luxury was to have time. I think that's what's the real luxury for people now, the time to do things, the time to think, the time to change. So the thing is about luxury is we need to obtain the real significance of luxury. And the significance of luxury at the time was to have something special, well done, that maybe no one else has or few people have, and that it's kind of not controversial, but not that everyone can have, not just about the price, but because about maybe where it's done, how it's done. It has to be something unique and special. That for me is luxury. Luxury is not because you have a Ferrari in your garage or the luxury of having something special that not everyone has. And it's not just because it's not about because it costs a lot, because that's would be a little bit too really too kind of socially racist, because it means that you're doing things that nobody can, not everyone can have. And so it's not about also the price, it's about maybe where you can find it, that you need to go there to find it, you need to have the passion to go there and find it. Or that's the luxury. And that's why this lockdown, I have to say, gave me so much to me, because I managed to do things which I never had the time. I did 2 online courses on sustainability, which I never had the time to do, which I'm still finishing one. I had the time to think about a project I had been thinking for many years and would like to bring on. I had the time to think of new projects for the work I do. And that for me is pure luxury. So I think it's just a matter of giving the significance the right one. And luxury and sustainability, unfortunately, fashion industry are 2 words that they totally raped out into, and now doesn't have any significance. And there are 2 very strong words that could really give power of their significance, but they need to be reappropriate of, of their message, of their initial message.
Yeah. And you know what, that was supposed to be my last question, but now I have one final one for you, which is something that I'm thinking about so much, because I couldn't agree more that time has been the most incredible gift. And it's, and we were obviously both working in a similar sphere before, which meant that I felt like my time was constantly just chock-a-block. Like, it was like I was just going through the motions, and, being able to actually pause and think about, is REV doing exactly what I want it to? What's my bigger goal here? What's our mission? What's the content I really want to bring to people? What are the conversations I want to be having? Like, I don't think I would have been able to spend as much time doing these podcast recordings had I not slowed down and thought that they were really, really fucking important. So this is my final question, how do you see yourself maybe promoting a bit more time, a bit more thoughtfulness, a bit of a slower pace into your own future and maybe that of the industry?
Well, for sure, as I said, thinking double or triple before deciding to travel, obviously, thinking about, is it necessary? And obviously, my aim is always to give much more awareness and consciousness to the outside. And because I think that it's kind of our responsibility and role, because I do think that when you decide to, which I haven't decided, but then my role has brought me to, be how do you say, a public person that people may follow you. You have a responsibility. Whether you have decided or not, the time when you realize that people, take you as an example or take you as a reference or count on you, you have to be there for them. If not, or you change idea and you go back, make a path back and decide to do something else. Or if not, if you decide to stay in the front line, you have to take the good and the bad. And I think that all those people that have this role really needs to take much more responsibility. And I have to say that I would be very happy, even on Instagram, to see much more, how do you say, more kind of intelligent profiles and with a message, and stop selling your life which is not your life, and just because you have to sell something which is not true. And I think that all those people, which I don't want to make it too vague, but has that label of being bloggers or social whatever, there's going to be a big cleanup on that, because I'm not totally against them, because I think that some of them have become really a reference and they become like a brand and really gave examples. But there's so many that were useless and didn't make sense, and brands totally lost on it, giving them the power of being the new advertising on Instagram. I'm not against it, because I'm not against it, but you have to do it in a more conscious, and you have to give messages, because I'm sorry, you open things, say that what a beautiful, but what about, it's like, I'm making a very Italian example. It's like you eating on the window restaurant in front of a poor family. You have to give, examples. And the examples need to be, even if they're maybe examples which not everyone can afford, you have to give a message. And this is important. And Instagram, unfortunately, it's a beautiful platform, but open judgments to everyone, which is wrong. And at the same time, also this thing of selling yourself or selling to everybody. It's true that there need to be laws, okay, but also a criteria of how you wanna, how do you say, give the message. Because, big companies, when the big thing of Instagram and bloggers or whatever how you want to call them came in, they went in panic mode because they didn't know how to deal with this. So the first thing was, let's give it to the cutie that has 300,000 followers, put the bags and go on, which this is how everyone started. Then there are people who have been very smart. And as I said, I'm not going to make names, that constructed a company, an idea, a message, and something. So I mean, you have to use your strength of doing, well, I'll make an example because this is a good example. In Italy, there is Chiara Ferragni, which I think she's
Yeah.
most famous.
Yeah.
And
This point.
I have to say that I'm not against her, but I think there are a few things which I don't agree. But her example is a beautiful example of someone that really wanted to obtain something and obtained it. But at the same time, during this lockdown, she and her husband, which is a famous Italian singer, decided to put the power of the strength of their social media to raise money for hospitals. They raised almost 5 million euros in 10 days, not even in 10 days. I mean, so this, is the power of doing something. Then there are things that maybe I don't like, but I mean, you cannot be liked by everyone, but this is the power of the strength of doing communication and making changes. So this is what needs to happen now. It's all about that. It cannot be just pretty face and, and just making a beautiful life.
Yeah. Well, a beautiful life, I think there's a new definition of what a beautiful life is going to be at the other side of this. And I think it will be a reflection of hopefully everything you and I have really touched upon today. So, Sara, thank you so much. That was really, really inspiring. And
no, thank you for having me. I hope I didn't went too long on.
No, no. I could sit here all day and speak to you, but I won't take up your time anymore. So just thank you.
No, thank you.
And
thank you for the questions, because I think we touched all important issues right now, and it's also, this is very important, to give the right messages, which is not just giving how do you say just naive messages, but real messages. And I think this is always part of that part we were discussing about the responsibility of giving the media, giving messages and awareness and the possibility to understand how things work.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you, and take
care and hope to meet you soon in person.
Bye.
Ciao. Thank you. Bye bye.